Chapter 4, God the Changeless One. God says in Malachi 3rd chapter 6th verse, I the Lord do not change. The New Testament too bears the same witness about the unchangeableness of God. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today forever. But what about when God gave a certain ceremonial law through Moses and then cancelled it later in the New Testament? Has God changed or not? Does Malachi 3rd chapter 6th verse mean that God acts, behaves, and reacts the same way in all situations and circumstances? We know that God acted and reacted differently at different times. Or does it mean that God remains in the same mood and temperament toward someone at all times, regardless of the circumstances and conduct of that person? There are a lot of questions like this when it comes to understanding God, yet we are called to be God's eternal companions. Thus, it is important that we understand Him. What kind of a God are we going to have a relationship with? What kind of a God are we going to share our lives with for eternity? At the outset, I submit that it is blasphemy to teach or believe that God remains in the same mood and temperament toward us regardless of our way of life. If that is the mental picture of God you have about has such hope in your God as an idol worshipper worshipping a lifeless stone. If our God is untouched or unmoved by our attitudes and lifestyle, he too would be just as good as a stone. At least the stone worshipped by the idolaters is visible. The stone these uninformed Christians worship is not even visible. God is not like a stone, He is a person. His moods do change according to our attitude and conduct. We have seen that God acted differently in different generations of human history. We know that God appointed Saul as king over Israel and then later turned against Saul. God called Moses to serve him and to lead Israel in Exodus 3rd chapter and strangely attempted to kill Moses midway at a lodging place. Is God not changing? We must understand and remember this truth that God has a definite nature and character. Malachi 3rd chapter 6th verse teaches us that the basic nature and character of God never changes. In fact, the whole Bible was written to reveal this basic nature and character of God to mankind. So we must draw the right picture of the God's character in our minds. We must read and meditate on the Bible well to get the right picture of God's character. For example, the events with Moses in Exodus 3rd chapter and 4th chapter speak much about God's character. The Bible reveals occasions of God showing anger, and then of some occasions when God blessed and prospered his people. The Bible is an account of how God acts and reacts to different people and situations. Thus, the statement God does not change means God always reacts the same way in similar situations. So, let us study God's unique behavior with Moses. God calls him to ministry in Exodus 3rd and attempts to kill him in 4th chapter. Why did God behave that way? Is he unpredictable and dangerous? Would God attempt to kill any one of us anytime without any reason? That can never be true about God. The God of the Bible is a merciful God. He is a God of justice too. Whatever he has done is bound to be 100% justice. It can never be otherwise. The hidden fact of this story is that there was disobedience in Moses' life. He had two sons named Gershom and Elijah. Moses, as an Israelite, knew that every child of Israel must be circumcised on the eighth day. Now, Zipporah, Moses' wife, was Midian lady. She saw her first son, Gershom, circumcised and was shocked to see the newborn baby bleed and cry from the pain. As a mother, she thought it is a horrible thing to circumcise a child. So, when she had the second child, Eliezer, she decided that her son should not be circumcised. She told Moses she did not want her second son to undergo all that pain. Moses surely might have tried to convince her, but she was adamant. She would not listen. So Moses finally left his second son uncircumcised to please his wife. Moses knew that was a lapse in his spiritual life. This was his shortcoming. Moses was not ignorant of God's commandment and covenant. He knew he was being disobedient to God. God appointed Moses to lead the Israelites. Moses should have gone home and had his second son circumcised. So, how would we lead people to obey God when there was disobedience in his own life? This is something serious. God was waiting and expecting Moses to correct himself. But Moses did nothing in this regard. He simply went home, told his father in law that he wanted to go back to Egypt and see his people, took his wife and sons, and set out on his journey to Egypt. What would God do now? Would he use a man who himself was disobedient to teach obedience to God's people? Would Moses be a good example to the children of Israel? Could Moses have a clear conscience while giving God's law to Israel, judging and punishing anyone for his disobedience to God's law? So God did not want a disobedient man to lead the people of Israel. So he came down and attempted to kill Moses to get Moses' attention about the seriousness of his sin. Moses did not say anything. There were no words spoken between God and Moses. In fact, there was no discussion between Zipporah and Moses either. Zipporah saw that God was attempting to kill Moses and she immediately knew the reason. She understood that the failure to circumcise the second son was the reason for God's anger. So Zipporah immediately plunged into action. She took a sharp stone and circumcised her second son and threw the foreskin at Moses' feet, saying, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." Only then did God take his hands off Moses because what he expected was done. This incident teaches us a great lesson. The God we serve is exciting regarding his commandments. He is not lenient with his law and takes it seriously when we deliberately disobey his commandments. Now, if we are ignorant of his commandments or incapable of obeying his commandments, God will always have mercy on us. But if we know his commandments and still take them lightly and neglecting them, it becomes a serious issue with God. Thus, he is a loving Father and a merciful shepherd. We must fear him. God expects us to keep his commandments. How dare anyone who knows his commandments neglect to keep them? Moses' experience at the lodging place is a great warning for all the children and servants of God. So, if we want to walk with God and be his first friend, we must take His commandments seriously. That means we must put forth our best effort to obey Him. After all, the commandments of our God are not too difficult to be kept. Jesus said in Matthew 11, chapter 30, verse, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." God never burdens His children with commandments that are too heavy and beyond their ability to obey. As I said before, the Bible is where God reveals Himself and His character to us. Thus, everyone who wants to walk with God must read the Bible, know God's commandments, and keep them carefully. God always blesses and uses those who are obedient to Him. That is the character of God displayed in the lodging place, and He has not changed. Even today, we serve the same God who came to Moses there on the way to Egypt. Let us serve Him in a way that is pleasing to Him. Similarly, God displays His character in all His dealings with His Similarly, God displays His character in all His dealings with His servants. In the life of Abraham, we see God as the God of impossibilities, and from the wilderness journey of the children of Israel, too, we learn many important facts about God's nature. God revealed Himself in the wilderness journey as a God who is merciful even when He is angry. For example, God declared that the generations that came out of Egypt would not enter the promised land because of their unbelief. That means God was punishing them for their unbelief, yet He was merciful to feed them with manna throughout the wilderness journey of 40 years. If He was angry, yet He took care of their needs. And God does not deal with everyone in the same way. God deals with everyone according to his or her attitude and character. In Psalm 18 chapter 25 to 27 verse, David portrays God's character in these words. With the merciful you will show yourself merciful. With a blameless man you will show yourself blameless. With the pure you will show yourself pure, and with the devious you will show yourself shrewd. For you will save the humble people, but will bring down haughty looks. This is the greatest truth we have to learn about God. Our attitude toward God decides what God's attitude towards us would be. God was good to Abraham, but we need to obey like Abraham in order to taste his goodness. That nature of God depicted in Psalm 18 chapter 25 to 27 verses has not changed, nor will it ever change. God will always remain a person who will justifiably deals with very person according to his or her basic attitude towards God. Let's follow the example of these saints of the Bible and becomes friends of God, leading the rest of our lives of obedience in the highest blessedness.